Hello, and welcome to Outside Looking In. My name is Ken, and I'm a white male, quite obviously. And that means I am exceptionally privileged. That means that by default, I have had a much easier life than any person of color has had in this country. I want to use my privilege to help amplify voices of color in my community here in Reno, Nevada. My guest today is named Alex. She is wonderful. She has quite a story to share with you. I hope you'll listen to it, and I hope you will take it to heart. And without further ado, here's Alex. Welcome, Alex, to the show. I really appreciate you being on the video here with me. I really wanted to do my part to amplify Black voices here in Reno, because I really do feel that there are a lot of people in Reno that probably feel we don't have race problems like other places, like Atlanta and Minneapolis and those big cities, those other metropolitan areas. We're
Right.
not like that here in Reno. So I appreciate
Right.
you actually being here today to give us your unique insight into this, because this affects you directly in a way it's never going to affect me.
Yes, very much so. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I think it is a great conversation that we need to be having in our country right now. And so I'm so glad to be on your show so that we can discuss it more. First, I'll start out by saying to any of your followers that I am blessed enough to have a successful podcast here in Reno, which was a trying thing, I'm sure, as you know, even with your show. We're not necessarily a very technologically driven city. So it's been really cool to see a lot of people reaching out and trying to find different information, especially locally for podcasts and for local YouTube channels. For me, I've always used humor. My podcast is a comedy podcast that I have with another host. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show was because, and when I say this show, I mean my podcast, is because, there were so many different things that just aggravated me on a daily basis. And some of them could be very menial and very small, and some of those issues could be very big. But coming from a comedy background, being a comedian myself, I thought it was always important to be able to voice that opinion, whatever it is, and using comedy relief, right, to kind of take the edge off of things. Now, I'm born and raised in Reno. This is my roots. This is where I've always lived. And I come from my mother was Black, my father Italian. I grew up in a very diverse family, but 100% surrounded by comedy, right? That was the big thing in our household, was comedy. You had to have a little bit of a thick skin to get it. So it really, and I say that to say that my parents and my sisters definitely gave me tough skin, like thick skin. They were just like, you can use comedy to get out of a lot of situations that are uncomfortable. You can use comedy as a very diverse answer to a lot of problems, right? So when I was my first experience, you spoke earlier about my relationship and what I've been exposed to in Reno. My first experience was in kindergarten. I went to Mimi Toll's elementary school, which I'm very proud to say is a great school, very supportive. I remember my mother dressed me and my cute little, and they were so cute. They were like these little braids, and I had them just popping, and they had little beads, and I looked so cute. Okay, I want to say that first. I looked very cute. I had a very fresh, popping shirt on. I had a cute pleated skirt. I was doing the most. I had my little cute white stockings and my little Mary Janes on, and I was ready for kindergarten. I was like, you girls aren't ready. Here I come, honey.
Fantastic.
And I remember my mom dropping me off in the morning, and I think I was a bit nervous and tearful, but she was definitely more nervous and tearful. And I remember watching her kind of in the window, as most parents do, just worried about their kids, as other hundreds of mothers were doing at the time. And we got through. Miss Fisher was my kindergarten teacher. I'll never forget her. She was amazing. And I remember getting through that day and just being so pumped. Like, I'm just like, I can't wait to get home, tell my mom. Shit's going off. I'm having a great day. I just learned how to make pancakes. I'm about to blow everyone's mind at home. And I remember my mom said, I'll be right at the front of the school. I'll be parked outside of the school waiting for you. So I was just like, oh, I can't wait to blow her mind. And as I'm leaving out of class and all the kids are dispersing, and I'm walking on the back end of the school because I was looking for my sister who was also in elementary school at the time, three young white boys came, pulled me down to the ground, pulled my shirt off, kicked me, spit on me, and called me a nigger.
Wow.
So
Crap.
that was my introduction to elementary school.
That was your first day of
And
kindergarten.
first day. And I remember looking around. I'll never forget, there was this really steep hill that they had like pushed me down and then they had met me at the bottom. And I remember when they left, I remember getting up and my pantyhose were ripped and I had grass stuck in my hair and in my shirt. And I remember thinking, I don't understand. I don't understand what a nigger is. I don't understand why they spit on me. I don't understand why they kicked me. I don't understand why they pulled my shirt off. Like, I just don't get it. And I remember not being angry so much as just being sad and confused. More actually confused, probably at the time, if I'm really being honest and I look back, more confused than I was sad. Sad because of the pain that was just caused, but confused because I didn't understand any of it. Now, that's not to say that my mother is from the South. She is a woman who believes in standing up for all rights. She is very vocal about that. What's right is right and what's wrong is wrong with her. So I don't want to portray this as my mother had never had the unfortunate black talk with me about the fact that there are people in the world who are very racist and they don't care. It doesn't matter how much money you do or don't have. It doesn't matter what you look like. It just matters that unfortunately they may have grown up in a household where they were taught these really horrible lessons about race. She did all of those things. Unfortunately, make what happened make sense in that moment. And I remember getting my book, my little books, my little book bag, my little coloring book. And I remember walking up the hill and having to grab onto the grass as I got up the hill. And I remember walking to the front of the school to see my mom. And I remember the minute I saw her, just like any kid, I was just like hysterical. I was just crying. And my mom was not the one. She wasn't the one then, and she sure as hell ain't the one now. And she picked me up. We went into that school. She said, "You sit right here in this chair." She got out the principal, who I still remember to this day, who was a black principal. And, of course, the situation was rectified. The three boys were expelled from Washoe County School District after, even though there were parents who fought it. I do remember that. I do remember at that age remembering parents fighting it. And of course, I remember the looks I got when I went back to school, and I remember people talking about it and kind of hushing when I came around. But that was like my first elementary school slash racist experience of my life. And I remember just being so hurt and so confused because it wasn't something that I had asked for. It wasn't something that I could wrap my head around because I couldn't understand. These were kids that were older than me. They weren't in kindergarten.
Oh, they weren't even in your grade.
No, if I'm remembering properly, and I could be recollecting incorrectly, but I believe they were in the third grade. Children.
And you'd never had any interaction with them, obviously, probably, right?
First
Because
day.
you were in kindergarten, first day. You
Nope.
weren't hanging out with third graders, and
Nope. And I remember thinking, this will never happen to me again. I will never allow a group of men, white women, anyone to put their hands on me like that. I will never let it happen again. Ever. Doesn't matter. So fast forward to about fourth grade, and my older sister, Inger, I believe I must have been in the third or fourth grade, and she was in the sixth grade, and we used to walk home, and it wasn't a far walk home. And I remember we were walking home and she was wearing the skirt. And she had, as most girls have, these little purses that come with like a little compact and makeup inside. And she just had this purse and she thought she was it. And as we're walking home, this little white boy just kept trying to pull up her skirt, just trying to look up her skirt and pull up her skirt. And at that point, it was like PTSD. And I remember grabbing her purse off her hand, wrapping it around my hand once, and just taking it and hitting him as hard as I could in the nose, just with all the fury of 1,000 suns, just as hard as I could. And immediately broke his nose. Blood was everywhere. We were scared. We ran home. We told my parents. And of course, the school dealt with it. And they were very understanding. And I remember my mom saying, the feeling that you felt then, your first experience with racism, is what will mold you and shape you about how you feel about it forever, because this is going to be the rest of your life. She said you're going to experience it probably throughout elementary school, you'll experience it through junior high and high school, you'll experience it in college. This will be something that you will always have to deal with. And I remember it feeling so heavy. That was a heavy statement, that this wasn't like a one time. She didn't come to me and say, okay, I'm so sorry this happened. This is an isolated event. It'll probably never happen again. You're going to be okay. Your family loves you. Your school supports you. No, it was like, oh, yeah, this is a totally thing that will probably happen again in your life. And you are going to have to learn to cope with it. And I just remember thinking, and obviously still thinking, how absolute unfair it was. How absolute unfair it was as a child that I had to worry about the behavior of other children who were taught this behavior by their parents. And my mom said it can make you angry and you can just hate all white people. You can just hate them all. Or you can say most people are good people. Most people want to learn, they want to do better. And sometimes they don't even know how to do better, right? It's going to take education and it's going to take conversations. But there are also bad people who, it doesn't matter how much good we do, it doesn't matter what we proclaim or how good we are as people, they are going to hate us because of our skin. And it makes, or because of our skin color. And it doesn't make any sense. Scientists and parents and doctors and lawyers and government officials have been trying to figure it out forever, and it doesn't make any sense. And it goes back to slavery, and it goes back to all of these things. And I remember her telling me, that is the first time I realized who I was named after. She said, your first name is Alex Haley. Your name is not Alex, and your middle name is not Haley. Your name is Alex Haley, after a very, very prominent and amazing Black writer who wrote and has been produced into a movie called Roots. And she sat me down and she popped it in and we watched it. And I was just like, oh,
Wow. That's
a lot to unpack.
Yeah, that's quite a wow.
Mm-hmm. But I'm so thankful that I came from comedy, because my parents could have been angry people who then took their anger towards Caucasians and said, well, fuck them all, forget them all, they're all awful, they're the white devil, and you can't trust any of them, you can only trust what's in this house. And they didn't do that. They didn't. They said there are people that we go to church to, there are people that are friends, your neighbors, people who genuinely love you. And you have got to try after you heal.
Right. It's an important distinction.
Mm-hmm. After you heal from this event, which you'll never truly heal from it, but I want you to be able to make a difference and make a change, but never lose your sense of humor about life in general. And so that is what I still have been trying to do for the 37 years that I've been on the earth.
So you say that you came from comedy and that you yourself are a comedian. Now,
yes.
Did your mom and dad do stand up at all, or were they involved in anything, outside of the home, as far as maybe acting, or had they worked?
Oh my gosh. First of all, the world wouldn't be ready. We would not be ready for these people. They are wild.
Okay.
I love my family. They are wild. But, for folks who don't know, in the Black community, we definitely use humor a lot to get over a lot. injustice, you name it. Because if we don't use humor, you start to go insane. You're like, am I like, is this just me? Am I missing something? So my mother, who is a very funny, not a comedian, my dad, who definitely is, I would say, a comedian. He used to do you remember K-Wins?
Yes. Yeah, I remember
Okay.
K-Wins. Yeah.
Okay. So my dad used to call in twice a week and he would do this like comedy sketch and he would do impressions and he would do Mike Tyson and he would do Evander Holyfield. My dad comes from a boxing background. Oh, he is hilarious. So funny, so funny. And I grew up watching him and listening outside the door while he would call into the radio station and it would be live. And I just remember thinking, my dad was in sales. He did a lot of different things. He wore a lot of different hats growing up. I mean, so was the 80s and 90s, a lot of parents did. But I just remember thinking he loved it so much. Like, why aren't you doing this all of the time? But obviously, as you become an adult, you understand that that isn't always the case, right? You still have like a family to feed and you still have very much responsibilities as an adult. So, as much as you would like to, immerse yourself in the comedy scene, that is definitely not what most adults are doing in Reno. One, the comedy scene wasn't popping back then. Not that it is now, but it's better. But also he had four kids that he was actively supporting. So it was definitely not something that they could immerse themselves in. But I definitely think this makes sense to my parents. My podcast makes sense to my parents. It makes sense to a lot of my family members. For me, stand up is something that I think is amazing and wonderful, but I have so much to say. So one stand up special or going on stage one time a week just would not be enough for me. I need a whole hour or more a week to just get it all out. So
Yeah.
that's my outlet. That's my outlet. Yeah.
I've listened
Yeah.
to your podcast. It's great. It's
Thank you.
extremely entertaining. I love it. I
Thank
really
you.
do.
Well,
I
and we wanted to create something that people, life is so tough. Obviously, in these times, it can be very depressing and it can be very sad. And so I definitely wanted to create something where people had the option, right? When you choose a podcast, when you hit play, you're making a conscious effort to go just for this hour and 30 minutes, I want to just get away from reality and laugh. And it could be about something very silly or it could be something very serious. But it was important for me to be able to have that platform for people every day.
and it's things like that are hard to. I mean, you really have to be focused and you have to really love doing it. Thinking up things, topics to talk about that you think are, maybe not only important, but just that are going to be appealing for you to want to talk about for an hour. Because I know it's an hour podcast, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you probably talk for longer than an hour, and the edited version comes out to an hour. Is that pretty accurate?
So typically, yes and no. Typically, our shows, I'm not a hardcore, like, has to stop at an hour. So sometimes our shows go a little bit longer, but not really. I typically do not like to cut a lot out of our shows unless there's like, some empty gaps. And the reason I do that is because as someone who loves podcasts and YouTube shows myself, I like to learn about you. And I think that is the beautiful thing about watching a YouTube show, listening to a podcast. Over time, you really get a true representation of this person. Now, you can watch a stand up show, which, by the way, I die in love for. But those that is work that somebody has critiqued over time. When you are listening to somebody and they're coming to you and they're telling you about their opinions and it's funny or it's serious or whatever it is, over time you really get an understanding of who that person is. And so I never want to I mean what I say and I say what I mean.
Yes.
And I never want to be, as you know, I never want to be truly, though, the kind of person that people go, well, she said this one time, or she's scared to say this, or she's scared to say that, or should I reword it that differently? No, I said what I said, and I mean what I say. And I never, of course, want to do anything to offend any person, any body of Anybody who is listening to our podcast that comes there for inspiration or just to laugh and get a load off. But I also want to get my point across. And it could be a very small point or it could be a very big point. But I'm sure you can relate. You spend your time and energy doing something that is a work of art. Your show is a work of art. My podcast is a work of art and it's a reflection of the both of us. And so if I'm not being 100% genuine, then what is the point? So typically when you listen to our podcast, I'm just cutting out like, you need to run to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. We'll be right back. I'll clip it together. But I try to leave in genuinely everything that we talk about without editing it because I truly want people to understand who we are as people.
I wanted to ask you, so you've used humor to cope with the racism that you've encountered all your life. If you had a lot of white friends, or if maybe the white friends in your social group were the minority in that situation, how did they relate to you? Did they talk openly about race with you? I mean, was that anything that ever came up, or did you all just kind of not speak about it?
So I think it's a little bit of everything. So one, I think that even going to I went to Reno High School and I have nothing but love for Reno High School, but I will say that, one of the things that I struggled with was one, seeing myself represented. And I still talk about that today. It's very hard as a child who is of color to really find yourself represented. So imagine, if you will, you wake up in the morning, you have your black mother, you have your black sisters, you all get it, right? So it could be about your hair, it could be about that struggle, it could be about whatever it is. You leave the house and you exit into the world, and now you're alone. So you get on the bus, maybe you walk to school, and you get there, and you are surrounded by predominantly white people. Predominantly. Now, I'm not going to say we didn't have any black students. We had 6 black students in total at our school, but typically we all did as much as we tried to hang out together for camaraderie. At some point, you have to make other friends. You have to be around other people, right? You can't just hang out with just those black folks and just like, well, we'll see the rest of them around. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
So, I had a lot of great friends that I'm still friends with today that I went to school with. But the interesting thing was always this. When someone would say a microaggression, and typically it always was a microaggression. I had people refer to me in high school as Black Alex because we had 2 Alexes. One Alex was white and me, myself, black.
And it's like
Always referred to. So you'd hear a group of people say, oh, I ran into Alex at that party last week. And they go, which Alex? Black Alex? And they'd be like, no, white Alex. And that was a descriptor that was used. Now, could I fight that descriptor and go, you guys could just like call me by my last name, which is what a lot of people did, right? So a lot of people called me just by my last name, and some called me Black Alex. Now, I could fight that. I could put my arms up and raise up and fight that. But at that point, there's so many other little microaggressions happening in the school every day. And it happened in junior high, it happened in elementary, it happened in high school. So I'm not picking on Reno High, but there's so many happening throughout the day. If I were to fight them all, I'd never get any rest. I would have never learned anything. But I will say the majority of the discrimination that I ever experienced, although I did have some really shitty students that were really awful to me, and there have been a few in my adult life who have come to me and apologized and said, what, there were things that I said to you when we were young, they were wrong. I should have never said them. And I apologize for any hurt that I ever caused you, which was like mind blowing to me. And then there were some students who live in my neighborhood now who still will not acknowledge the fact that they 100% bullied me, made my life extremely hard for absolutely no reason other than my race, right? There were those people. But they're children. As an adult, I can look back and go, they were kids, regardless of how messed up it was, they were children, right? They learned that behavior from somebody, regardless if it was TV, their parents or grandparents. That was a learned behavior. There were more to the note of the racism and the microaggressions were teachers.
Hmm.
That is actually my biggest qualm was teachers. I had teachers who 100% treated me different because I was Black. 100%. I couldn't get a word out edgewise. I couldn't defend myself. I remember once I was talking to a history teacher and we were talking about Othello. And I turned in my homework and I said to her, you know, it's fine. Like I turned in my assignment, but can we acknowledge that, like, we will never use this in adult life? And I stand by that. I've never been in the bank and they've been like, can I get your driver's license? Go ahead and slip that ATM card in. And before you do, Othello's second act, who is the main character? Can't get your money until you tell me. Okay. No one's using Shakespeare. No one is for out thowing, and no one is doing that on an everyday basis. Okay.
Right.
But I remember her saying to me, she said, these are lessons that you have to learn, and they 100% will follow you into your adult life. And I said, no, they won't. No, they won't. Romeo and Juliet taught me what? Just to not get caught up and drink, like follow a man around and let me poison myself. That's the only lesson I'm learning here. It's like, don't just be a follower.
Right.
She was like, no, there's a larger lesson. I'm like, you're wild. There is no larger lesson. This is something that the school district said that I had to, like, just acknowledge that. If you just acknowledge that,
Right.
then I don't have a problem turning in this assignment. And I remember her saying to me, well, you don't understand because your people never had to. Your people aren't involved in this kind of in this kind of history. Shakespeare Shakespeare wasn't written for your people.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, cool, but let's get back to the main point again. When am I going to use this again? My people, your people, any people. You know, and I remember talking to my mom, and I said, it's just wild that she was so bold. And at this point, I would think I was like 15, 16. So I was hip to the game. I was like, it's so wild that she felt okay for her to say to me, well, this wasn't written for your people. Just learn what you need to learn, write down your paper, and turn it in. And it's like, that's not what was happening there. As a student, I was critically thinking. That was your time as a teacher to come to me and go, you know what? You're right. You're not going to use it. But, you know, the school system is what it is. And they're trying to get you to learn a variety of different things. And they want you to go out into the world, and maybe you'll become an actress, and maybe you'll go on and to be on big stages in New York. And so when the education system does this, they're just trying to get different brain cells to spark off in certain people to see what they like in the future. You could have said that, but instead what you said was, well, this wasn't meant for your people. So that makes sense why you don't get it. Like, that's insane. And so that's why it's so important, especially on my platform, to talk about these things. We can jump forward and we can say, this is just about police brutality. And I think I posted a comment on Instagram and I tagged a lot of the different news groups and some of the different newspapers because I feel like it is our responsibility to start holding others responsible. Racism isn't just something that's happening between police officers, Black men and Black women. That's not what's happening. Yes, is it a large issue because they have guns and they can kill us? Obviously. But let's start the trickle down effect, right? Shit rolls downhill. So let's talk about our schools. Let's talk about big businesses. Let's talk about small businesses. As a business owner, you should be taking a step back, meeting with your management, and then saying, we need to branch out and speak to our people. I don't care if you have all Caucasian workers. We need to be all sitting down and talking about how do we treat the diverse group of people in our city that come in here every day and give us their hard-earned money to keep our businesses going. How are we treating them? Are we treating them the same way as we treat white people? And if we're not, then let's start learning. Let's start changing that behavior. If a Black kid is in here on his laptop doing a homework assignment, but only got 1 cup of water, are we calling the cops on him for sitting here taking up space? Or are we saying maybe this is the one place this kid could get internet so that he could do his homework? And as a group, as a city, as a group of people that support one another, we say, hey, why don't we give this kid a free cup of coffee, maybe a free cup of tea, so that he can get his work done to better himself, to go out and be a better person in our community and reflect us better. But those conversations aren't happening. And instead, we want to take pictures of, and again, I want to be very clear, there's a difference between rioting and there's a difference between protesters. When people use that and group them together, we feel very irritated and upset and annoyed because there is a huge difference and a large problem. And I feel like people need to focus. Of course, we can talk about writers and how awful that is, but can we also talk about how, a teacher went on to News Channel 8 and talked about how, at Hug High, she as a teacher for 20 some odd years said every day she watched Black students and Hispanic students being treated 100% differently than Caucasians. That is a teacher. We have an obligation and responsibility to our youth, to the people that are spending money in our communities and supporting these businesses whose windows are being broken into, and people who are being, we owe an obligation to our own people in our own communities to go, what are we doing and how can we make it better?
So, why do you think there seems to be resistance or reluctance or whatever you want to call it to doing just that? What is your impression of why there are people who just refuse to acknowledge someone else's basic innate humanity? Because I can't wrap my head around it. I don't understand how you can completely dehumanize an entire group of people based on nothing more than the color of their skin, or even if you want to go so far as to the people who do it over religious differences or anything. I just don't
Right,
understand
right,
that
right,
mindset. So obviously, as you said, there are teachers that have seen it maybe for their whole entire teaching career,
right,
but then you have
right,
administrators that aren't listening to those teachers. And why would that even be a
right, right,
question?
right. So I think there's two different problems happening at one time. One of them is guilt. I'm sure as an adult, you have seen it with your adult friends. They get older. Maybe you're out to coffee and you're like, how's it going? And they go, it's going pretty great, but my dad and I maybe just we're not getting along right now. And you're like, what's going on? And they're like, I love my dad. You know my dad. He's great. I love him. But there are some fundamental issues that have happened in my childhood that I want to discuss that he is not willing to acknowledge. And every time I bring it up to my parent, they're giving me revisional history. They're telling me that my feelings and what I experienced with them is not correct. And they don't want to bow to it and they want to downplay what happened. And I'm not saying that you were a horrible parent overall. I'm just saying there were things that happened. And if you can acknowledge those things, then we can move forward into a better relationship, right? That's an easy concept for everyone to get. We've all had it with our parents as adults. There's a quote that as adults you all hear, there's nothing worse as a child than when you become an adult and you realize that your parents are adults too and they make mistakes, right? We've
Right.
all heard that.
Yep, absolutely.
I believe that a lot of people are so worried and concerned about being called a bigot or a racist. Okay, so let's take that and we'll put it over here. Do you remember some time ago when we really started getting back into the whole Confederate flag thing? Right? We started taking down statues. We started saying, this isn't right, right? And we shouldn't have a flag that is flying in these cities, in these different states, that 100% represent racism and slavery, right? That was an easy concept for 75% of us to understand. But the remainder of the individuals were just hardcore, right? They were like, but it's not about slavery. It's talking about the South. This isn't about racism. This is about being excited and representing Mississippi. I don't understand why you think this is about racism, right? And we all kept screaming, how do you not understand? When that flag was around, it 100% coincided with racism, which is why we have a new flag, right? We didn't get the same flag. We got a completely different flag, right? And it was not hard for people to understand why that would cause people pain to see that flag. But there are still people today that have the bumper sticker, that have the flag with the American flag, and they just cannot make the mental leap. Because as many times as we tell them it's about racism, they're going to tell us it's not about racism, it's just about the South. When you and I both know that, I mean, I've never seen such sore losers. You lost. You lost. Typically, when you lose, you got to get off the field and take your shit with you, right? That's like
Right.
normal every day.
Yep.
I've never seen such sore losers. You guys have been losing for 400 years. Take the flag down. But they 100% refuse to do it. Now I want people to think about money, currency, pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, dollar bills, $5 bill, $100 bills. As a Black person, every single day, when I have to go pay for anything, I am reminded by slavery because slave owners are on our money, right? That's a
Right.
small message in our little brains every day. Regardless if you realize it, you hand the dollar, you don't think about it. I don't think about it. I hand my dollar over, I don't think about it. But is it still the truth? Yeah, 100%. Race slavery is so deep in our soil. The racism, the injustice is so deep into our soil that it's almost like everything around us that we refuse to let go of because we're like, this is our history. This is our history. We can't let go of this because that means history will be different. That's not true. We still can look back and go, all of these historical things happened. George Washington and Lincoln, Jackson, all of those things still happened. But as a group of people, we can say, hey, how about we don't let people who are Black be reminded every day? Let's take some subtle reminders away. Let's take some big reminders away. But we almost think, well, nope, then we call it non American. So you're a non American, you don't believe in America, you don't support the troops, support the flag, you're anti American. If you don't like it, get out of here and go somewhere else. So as Black people, we go, okay, we can't fight every fight. We'll just be quiet because we fight every fight, but we'll keep spending the money and we'll keep doing whatever we need to do. And some of us will keep marching and some of us have to go to work on Monday and we'll just keep status quo as is. And so we don't make a fight. We don't make a fuss. We don't talk about it at work. Because what's the point? If you're the one Black person surrounded by 40 white employees and you're trying to every day get them to understand the small aggressions that they deal with on a daily basis, you would have no voice. Your voice would be gone. And so now white people are like thinking back. They're starting to think back. Oh, what else seems a little bit off? Oh, there's the money thing. Okay, yep, there's that shit. And then there's Jerry in the cubicle who keeps making jokes about Sandra's braids. And then there's the Michael who's in his cubicle talking about eating watermelon and fried chicken. And there's all these small things, right, that you see every day that we don't say anything and they just go on and you know they're wrong, right? In the stomach, your stomach turns, you know they're wrong. But if you fight every fight, you never have enough energy to get to work every day or get home. So now that we're at this point where people are like, we've had enough, we have had enough. We're going to march and we're not going to stop screaming and yelling until people finally acknowledge our pain, until people acknowledge that every day when we leave the world, our homes, excuse me, that there is this weight on our shoulders. There's this huge backpack we're carrying around all day that no one else is having who is white to carry around. White people are like, oh shit, okay, yeah, you're right. You are right. Wow, when you really take those sunglasses off, right? Finally, you don't have a choice but to see it all. And I can only imagine for white people, it has to be overwhelming. For white people who have never been put out a microaggression, put out a macroaggression, never thought a racist thing, never slighted a person of color, whether they're Black, Hispanic, and it doesn't matter. They've never done anything to ever hurt anyone. When you finally take those glasses off and you're seeing the sun for the first time, how overwhelming. How overwhelming to see it's in every nook and cranny of everything we do. And it's not just a police issue. This isn't just a being in schools issue. This is an issue everywhere. This is an issue where white people feel like they can call the police on us for small indiscretions that they view as wrong. It's where your children, your sons, you have to get them ready to how to deal with the police when they're being pulled over, or as a white man being married to a Black woman, how that 100% not only impacts our relationship, your job, my job, and the kid that lives in our home. You really start to look at it everywhere. And I'm married to a white man, and I'll tell you, there even recently, he's just like he's been so overwhelmed because it's nonstop information coming. It's just coming all the time. Here's some more stuff. Here's some other stuff that you would have probably never thought of. And now people are 100% saying, this is wrong. This has always been wrong. But we're so tired. We're tired of having to speak up every time, even the smallest injustice happens. Black people are tired. We are tired of trying to educate. We are tired of trying to explain. We are tired of trying to give examples when people really could have done the work a long time ago. And it's not blaming anyone, right? World goes on, you go to work, you do your job.
Yeah.
But these things have been happening for a very long time. It's just you're seeing it all at one time and it's very overwhelming. So I do understand for the people who have never done anything, um, who have never had an ill will or ill thought, I understand how it could be overwhelming when you're like, wait a minute, I want to make change. I want to do better. I want to educate my other friends. How can I do it? And then to show them all this information, all the stuff that their parents, their grandparents have said, little slights here, little digs there. How can you imagine dissecting as a white person in your 50s, all the way for 50 years, going back and thinking, okay, so maybe my parents were pretty racist about the things and the ideals they were thinking. Yeah, my grandparents were probably very unjust and racist about the things that they were doing and saying. That's a lot to happen at one time. In what, 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, I've never seen anything like this, and it's and to be 100% honest, I had no idea that it was still as bad as it is. I honestly thought that after what happened with Rodney King and the ensuing riots, I thought that when I was seeing stories in the media about, a cop being a complete ass and violating clearly this black person's rights, that those were exceptions, that those were outliers, that overall we had moved on past that after Rodney King. And it's been very sobering to realize just how amazingly wrong
Right.
I was about that, just based on what's happened over the last 3 weeks. I have just, it is overwhelming.
It is very
Absolutely.
overwhelming.
Absolutely.
Very overwhelming. Yeah. And it's overwhelming and it's sad. And my husband said to me, it is like having a child that you love, that you've loved your entire life, that you can't wait to see, you kiss at night, you put to bed, and then they hit 18 and they come to you and they go, where were you? And you go, what do you mean? I've always been here. I've always loved you, nurtured you, cared for you. And they go, yeah, but every day when you left, my new stepmom was beating the shit out of me. And I was having to listen to her physical abuse, verbal abuse. She made me hide it. I didn't feel safe enough to come to you to say, this is what's been going on. And as a person who is an adult, I don't care if you have children or not, that is tough to swallow. That is the one thing as an adult we can all come together and say, it's hard to swallow. When a child looks at you and you think you knew the narrative of their life for 18 years, and they come back to you and go, that is not how I grew up. That is not what happened. And you're remembering it one way, and I love you, and I know you meant the best for me, and I know you wanted to protect me, and I know you wanted nothing bad to ever touch me, but guess what? It did every day, all day. And yeah, there were good days. We went to Disneyland. We had family dinners on Sunday, and we played cards. But every time I was at Disneyland and playing cards and having those family dinners, somewhere in the back of my mind, I was just waiting for you to not be there and me not be protected. And I said, that's a wonderful way of explaining it, because it is 100% heartbreaking as a person, as a Black person, to even my white friends who have come to me in tears, and I've been in tears. And they're just like, I'm so sorry. Why would I ever want to not be there for you? Why would I never want to not be present? Why would I never want to not have your back? I would always want to do those things. I didn't know, I didn't realize. And you have people say, you have to believe me, you have to believe me. I believe you. There's no person in my life right now that I think I don't believe. I don't believe that you didn't think this was an issue. Of course I do. Of course I do. Doesn't mean it's not happening.
Right.
Doesn't mean it wasn't a thing. You know what I mean? So I'm so appreciative that people like you have stepped forward and said, and been brave enough, right? Because as a white person, it does take some bravery to go, what are we doing? What am I doing wrong? Am I doing something wrong? And if I'm not doing anything wrong, which is also okay to say, not Black people aren't running around going, well, every white person is the devil. We're not saying, obviously, we're not saying that, but we are saying we need some help. We can't be, and we have been, the people for the last 400 some odd years that have been saying there is a real problem. And every time you hear about discrimination in the workplace, or you hear about it in schools, it's like, well, okay, that's all we ever hear, right? Black people are so, and when are we going to stop talking about slavery? Never, never. It's so deep. It is so deep into us. We cannot ever stop talking about it. It is not something that we should ever, as a group of people, be trying to forget. This is something that we should actively be talking about. And isn't that amazing in your mind that after Rodney King, you thought to yourself, well, shit is looking up. We are really getting it together, we as a group of people. And meanwhile, while you were saying that, Black people were like, it doesn't matter. It's never going to get any better. But we're still going to keep going to work. We're still going to keep dribbling balls. We're still going to be passing that football. We're still going to be entertaining people. We're still going to be singing on your stages. We're still going to be living our lives every day, but still deep down, we know it doesn't matter how successful you are, how rich you are, how beautiful you are, how you have contributed to your society, that it will never be enough. And that feeling of never being enough and never truly being free, I would never wish that on anybody. And so I am happy that white people are standing up. I am so proud of the people that I know that are like, you know what, let's talk about this. This issue's not going to die. We're going to talk about this for as long as we need to talk about it, until people start really waking up and figuring out what's going on. And maybe I don't have all the answers. Maybe I don't know, but I can definitely walk those walks, do those marches, and be there and be present for the Black community. So when they say, we need you to help us with your voice, we are there.
There's a lot that has to be done, obviously. And I guess this is where it starts. I mean, this has to be the beginning, because it just cannot continue the way it has. It can't.
Yeah.
And so I guess my last question then for you would be, what do we do about those who are so entrenched with their beliefs that there's no arguing with them, that there's no, I mean, I know that the kumbaya popular thing to say is that we can all find common ground somewhere. There's a point where you've got to be able to admit that no, that particular person, it's a lost cause.
Right.
How are we, I guess, what do we do? How do we just try to navigate around them as best we can and reach out to those who there might still be hope for?
Right.
Well, I don't,
one of the most important things I think to do, and I've said it on my podcast 1,000 times, muting people who have nothing to add to the conversation that is uplifting, but rather a distraction from the main point, is one of the biggest things that you can do. By not giving people a voice, here's the thing. If you want to be racist and you want to, direct people's attention to all these other initiatives, you can do that. But if you have no group of people who are logging on and listening to you, then you're just talking to the wall. You are simply talking to the wall. And I know it's so much easier to, on these social media applications, to just scroll past it and pretend like it doesn't exist and go, oh, well, that's just how Mark is. And oh, that's just how Tabitha can be. No. How about no? How about you don't get to say things like that, post articles like that, and still have me on your platform looking as if I align with your thought process. And by staying on that person's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it is, you are silently saying, I 100% I may not agree with you, but I don't find what you're so problematic that I'm going to mute it. That's number one. Number two, it's just about educating ourselves. As a person who is not of color, it is about educating yourself. I say it all the time. Google is free. Homegirl is free. She doesn't charge you. You can log in anytime, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. She's on your phone. She's on your computer. She's on your watch. She is there. Let her help you. Educate yourself. There is a difference between being ignorant and being just uneducated, right? If there was a subject you were uneducated in, you'd read books and you would talk to someone who is as educated in that field as you wanted to be. Educate yourself. Find out what you can do. Go and meet with people. You have this wonderful show. Have more people on. Talk to them about their experience. Find out what that reality in the world looks like. My husband and I talk about it all the time. A couple of weeks ago, a white man followed me to the grocery store, blocked me in, wouldn't let me out. I had another white man at Rayleigh's and in my area, but I get this a lot because there's a lot of white people that live in Somerset that just think that I'm like passing through, like I don't live in this area. And so they're just like, well, go back to your neighborhood, get out of here. And so they aren't going to show me the same respect, and they're not going to show me all of the same, respect that they would give anybody else. And so for me, it is so hard sometimes because I want to pop off. I want to give them the same energy they give me back. But there's two things that I do. One, I always tell them, Jesus is watching you. He's always watching you. He's watching you and your horrible sins. But two, I have a platform, right? I can go onto my platform and say, these are the things that are happening. This was my experience. This is what's going on in my city, without having to get into a physical altercation. Now, and I do mean this, when I exit the world with my white husband, my life is different. When I exit the world as a Black woman by myself, my experience is very different. He's aware of that. I'm aware of that. He acknowledges it. I acknowledge it. And sometimes as a white person, just acknowledging and saying, you are right. Our worlds are so different. It is easier out here in these streets than it is for me. And my privilegedness is far vaster than yours will ever be. And the fact that Caucasians still can't understand white privilege is mind-boggling. It's not about actual, I think people take it the wrong way, but again, do your Google search. Get online, educate yourself about what these mean, what a microaggression means, what a macroaggression means, what all of these terms to describe out and out racism mean. And so I think those are the largest things that people, especially in Reno, that along with not stop talking about it and not thinking that, well, Reno isn't that bad. I mean, I'm sure we have it, but it's not that bad. Well, you're not the person it's being inflicted on.
Right. It's
You're
not
not
my
the
call to
person.
make if it's that bad or
Exactly.
not. Yeah.
And you don't know when, being a Black woman, it's always like extra tardy for me when, for my job, obviously I help people. And then I go out into the world and I go and do my thing. And it's always like, it baffles my mind when these things happen when I'm wearing scrubs, because I'm like, what do you think these scrubs are? Like, I am out in this world helping other individuals, doing the best that I also can to make our society and our community better. And you still are being just the worst piece of crap. And so it is hard for me to overcome it. But I also know that not everyone is like that. And then not all the people that I know in my life that are white that are like that. And so that keeps me going. And obviously for 1 to 1.5 hours a week, I can rant about how awful they are.
Right.
But and I also want to give a very clear message to people of color. If you're listening to this, find something that gives you a voice. Find something that is an outlet, because it is too hard to keep it all in. It is too hard to always keep in the injustice, keep in the anger. And I don't want any person of color to be angry based off of the way that they've been treated about white people and take that out into the world. You can be upset and angry about the situation and about what's going on, and hopefully that causes you to have change. But I don't want any Black person to ever go out and change who they are as a person fundamentally because of what some white person has chosen to do to them. But I want people of color to find something to let that aggression out in a positive way, in a way that is going to be helpful to our community. Because I find that even myself, if I don't have those outlets, I find myself becoming very angry and very resentful. And I find the way that I interact with white people starts to change and look very different. And I don't want any person to change who they are in the core and to become someone that they never wanted to be because they allowed one white person who was awful, then a second white person, then a third. And I'm not saying take it. That is not what I am saying. But I am saying we cannot allow those people to have our power. There's a website that is on Instagram. There's a page that I follow, and one of the great things I love about that page is people who have recorded the injustice, people being racist, people doing horrible things to people of color. They post the video, and then they find the person who it is in the world, and then they tag their employer and they go, "This is the person that you're employing. This is the person that is representing you out in the world when they clock out at 5 o'clock." That is what I'm talking about. Finding something that is meaningful, that is going, because we just need, and mental health, like go and talk to a counselor if you're a person of color. Even if you're a white person and you're feeling guilty, go and talk to a therapist and have them help you work through these feelings. Because white people feeling guilty and Black people feeling angry is never going to solve this problem. We have got to figure out a way to have those feelings, but bring them down a little bit, enough to start collectively bringing apart and bringing change to our communities.
I think that's as good a place as any to end. So thank you, Alex. I really do appreciate all of this, and I hope this helps. I know it's just a small thing, but I hope that maybe someone's going to watch this and maybe come to some realizations, no matter what their
Yeah.
skin color is. And I'm going to do my best to be supportive and
Yeah.
to help however I can, because it's long overdue for all of us to start working together, because we're all here together and
Yeah.
we're all human. And we've got to recognize that if we're going to survive. We've got so many things on the horizon that we've got to be united to work through, whether it's climate change, whether it's political change. There's a lot of stuff that's looming that now more than ever, all of us have to be united and working through this, if we want to recognize our world in another few months and years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we just can't let that overwhelming feeling of guilt stop us from the mission at hand. And that is to make sure that every day, all of us, no matter where you are from, we are all treated with equal treatment and freedom. True, everyday freedom. And if you can say as a person, I've never had to worry about my freedom, that is the problem. You need to go, okay, but who else hasn't been given that same freedom in the exact same country, city, and state that I live in? And how can I make a change? Small or big, a change is still a change. So thank you so much for having me on the show. I really do appreciate it. And I love any talks like this. You were so cute. I love it. You sent me a message and you said, all right, well, I'm going to let you know the talking points. I was like, you do not need to send me talking points. I am geared up. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. I got 37 years. How much time do you have? So thank you so much. It was really a lot of fun. And
This is
I'd love to
great.
have you on the podcast too, so we can, continue to have good talks, whether it be about race, what's going on in our cities, in our states, or whether it's something and lighthearted. So always want to have you a part. So thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Alex. Thank you very much. All right. I'll talk to you
Yeah.
soon.
All right. Talk to you soon.